I didn't forget. The 1954-55 season, let's do this, which means that tomorrow morning I'll be doing 55-56. There you go. Late night, talking about history. This is a big year. Now, what's weird is this. These are the exact same standings as the last season. Detroit, 42-17-11. Montreal, 41-18-11. Look at this. Montreal's getting better. Detroit's still excellent. Toronto, 24-24-22. Boston, 23-26-21. A lot of ties. Lots. Rangers 17-35-18, and the Chicago Blackhawks 13-40-7. So while all the standings stay the same and Chicago remains abysmal, just abysmal, they don't even get an award out of it this year. Oh wait, yeah they did. Yeah, no, there was an award in there. This is the Rocket Richard season. This is the year. The Rocket Richard and the whole Clarence Campbell thing goes. So yesterday, you just go ahead and turn back. Yesterday I discussed the Rocket Richard issue where he wrote for a Quebec newspaper that Clarence Campbell was a dictator for banning Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion from games. Well, a year later, that gets worse. Rocket Richard was probably one of the greatest goal scorers of all time. Absolutely one of the first great goal scorer. But the Riot overshadows 400 goals. Yeah, Riot. So here's what Clarence Campbell does. Something that, I mean, we talk a lot about Bettman and sometimes where he has guts here and there, or we ask whether or not he's clueless, showing up at certain locations. Clarence Campbell presides over the NHL as Rocket Richard loses his mind against the Boston Bruins. Hal Laycoe clips his ear. Richard decides, I'm going to eviscerate him with my stick. And when he goes to get his stick and go after Laycoe, linesman Cliff Thompson holds him back, and he turns around and punches the official. There's no accidental, there's no concussion, there's no argument against anything. He punches an official. Clarence Campbell goes, all right, that's it. You're done for the rest of the regular season and no playoffs either. He punched an official. I can't think of anybody in the NHL that could punch an official towards the end of a regular season and not get suspended for the rest of the regular season. And look at probably being suspended through at least part of the playoffs too. Richard loses his mind. But the Montreal faithful lose their mind as well. The next game, Clarence Campbell decided to show up in the Montreal Forum. Is it courage? Is it foolishness? Either way, the fans take it out on Clarence Campbell and then decided to try to burn the city down while they were at it. And it overshadows everything. It overshadows that Rocket Richard had 400 goals. It overshadows that he was the number one goal scorer that year in the NHL. He was tied for the lead in goals. He ended up losing the race for first in scoring by 1 point. And of course, he gets suspended those 3 games. So Bernie Geoffrion gets the Art Ross. Probably doesn't feel like an Art Ross winner at the time. So what else was going on? Well, December 9th of 1954, before all that crap happened, Toronto and Montreal have a bench-clearing brawl that sees 15 misconducts and 36 penalties. And that's a record. We talk a lot about players in the game who play on or over the edge. And we have a lot of discussions about guys from the Philadelphia Flyers. We make jokes about Mike Milbury and the shoe incident in New York, and we'll get into that as the history goes along. But if Rocket Richard's incidents were all caught on tape, and again, if we'd had cameras back then like we have now, Rocket Richard would have been reviled by fans around the NHL. It would have been a very Marchand-type action, or Marchand-type opinion, which would be, if this guy could settle his temper down and not cross the line, we'd love him. And he scores all these goals, but man, he was gonna kill Hal Laycoe. So it is what it is, and Montreal still persevered pretty darn well considering they lost their number one goal scorer right before the playoffs. Terry Sawchuk, meanwhile, in other action, Sawchuk sets a record with 3 40-win seasons, and he gets back into the Vezina. Sawchuk, amazing. And Dick Irvin, also in other news, is the first coach ever to 100 wins in the playoffs. good for him. Something good going on. The Hart Trophy goes to Ted Kennedy of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Not the Ted Kennedy that would be a senator in the States, of course. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? The guy's like over 100 years of age and senator. Anyways. Art Ross, Bernie Geoffrion in Montreal, known as Boom Boom. Norris Trophy goes to Doug Harvey, also of Montreal, who sets a record with 41 assists that year. His 41st assist broke a record. Ed Litzenberger is your Calder winner for the Chicago Blackhawks. Vezina goes to Terry Sawchuk, as I mentioned. And Lady Bing goes to Sid Smith of Toronto, who I assume was the only guy who didn't leave the bench in that brawl with the Montreal Canadiens. Said, dude, I'm going for the Bing. I can't get out there. All kidding aside, though, this is really contentious stuff. How does it work out in the playoffs? Well, Toronto plays Detroit again. Detroit wins 7-4 and 2-1 at home. So Toronto goes home and loses 2-1 and 3-0. Detroit sweeping Toronto. Toronto's time as a Stanley Cup contender over for now. But because the Rangers and the Hawks are so bad, it's still the same four teams at the top. Boston plays Montreal, and what have I said about the Boston-Montreal series? That's right, it doesn't favor Boston. It's a bad matchup for Boston. Let's look at it. Montreal wins both at home 2-0 and 3-1. Boston then wins at home 4-2 to bring back some hope. Then they force overtime in Game 4 to make that hope turn up just so they can snuff it out and step on it. Montreal scores in overtime. They win that one to go up 3-1, and they win 5-1 in Game 5. Let's go to the final. And it's a barn burner. And it's a shame that it's a barn burner while there's burning going on as well, because this is a great series. This is clearly a great series. Detroit wins both games at home 4-2 and 7-1. Montreal's got to win at home, so they do. They win 4-2 and 5-3. Detroit wins Game 5 5-1. Game 6 goes to Montreal 6-3. Game 7, Detroit wins it 3-1. Detroit, third Stanley Cup in 4 years. That makes them a dynasty. The Detroit Red Wings are a dynasty in the NHL. And it is a dynasty. It is a year that's kind of overshadowed by the Rocket Richard thing, because when we look back to the 50s, the Richard Riot is the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people. It is, I mean, if you looked at the videos I did a few days ago, I could barely get anything on this board. There wasn't a whole lot going on that was newsworthy. Rocket Richard makes everything newsworthy. And Rocket's not done yet. But for this year, it's still Detroit. The thing is, Detroit doesn't seem to be getting better. Montreal is. And starting tomorrow, we'll see just how much better Montreal's going to get. But anyways, there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know it's late. It's never too late for history. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, I'll talk to you again soon.